So I'm going to call the meeting to order of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. According to Steve, we have a quorum, which is great. Thank you. So our first business that we need is the approval of the minutes from the actually the minutes are December 16th, 2020, but they're dated January 19th, 2022 is what it says, the draft meeting minutes. So if you could take a look at those, and if you have any comments or modifications that need to be made, please speak up.
Actually, Michael, do we have the same, you're saying we have the same date?
No. What I was reading part of the minutes themselves. I apologize.
Oh,
so the
okay.
date of the minutes are January 19th, 2022,
Perfect.
which Carrie had sent out.
Wait a second.
Right.
I have a concern about this. Where it talks about the minutes, that seems to be a carryover.
I know that's why that's December 16th, 2020.
And it was talking about a meeting in early 21 where we would, that.
I'm looking at minutes from January 19th, 20.
Right. It's item 2A is the.
Right,
the
correct.
confusing part.
That's part of those minutes that are probably incorrect.
Yeah, can we strike that? And if it needs to be amended, we'll do it next time. Can you strike that first line?
It's not, this is Kathy. It's not that the minutes are incorrect. I think it should be 2021, December 16th. You had a meeting in December of 2021 that the minutes, were those approved at that time?
I don't know, but it may have been.
I don't think we had a meeting in December. If we had one in
Maybe
January.
March? Is March ringing a bell? Okay, I'm gonna strike that and then we'll figure that one out for the next.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Kathy, that's on me. I'll work with you so we can remedy it next time.
Thank you.
Great. So let's just kind of go through. Anybody has any comments on the minutes of January 19th, 2022?
Looks good to me. We did the audit report. Okay. So there was no meeting on April 20th, or there was a meeting on April 20th, 2022 at John Adams Performing Arts. I think I missed that one if there was one.
There was not a site tour.
So yeah, so under item number 7.
Well, that was just tentative. That was the plan to be confirmed. I mean, that wasn't.
Going forward.
So in January, we're going to maybe confirm it, but yeah, okay, got it. So if we fix the first item number, or the second, the rest of it looks fine.
Any more comments from anybody on the committee? I need a motion to approve the minutes then with the noted corrections.
I move to approve the minutes.
So Kathy, say who you are.
Kathy Reuter, I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank
Bruce
you.
Sultan.
Great. So let's take a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye or raise your hand, whatever is easier. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Our next item, action items. There are none. Correct, Steve?
Correct.
Okay. Is there anybody listening that wants to do public comments that's not a committee member? I don't hear anybody, so we'll move on. Program updates. I imagine Carrie will take over at this point.
Yes, I will. One moment as I bring up that.
We can probably
The
share
first one
BB
of the-
first.
Yeah, the first one.
BB will be pretty quick. I mean, you should all have it, but one of the things you'll see is that I'm getting some feedback here. One of the things you'll see is that we've our expenditures in BB were right around just over $1 million in this time period. the bulk of that was $750,000 on the Malibu High School new building. And there's, there will still be a few more. We might be about out of it, but we're getting to the point where we're about to release. Well, it would normally be retention, but this is a lease back, so we have retained lease payments. So we'll have a year of those payments that'll be made, but we don't actually make them directly. They're coming out of escrow. We've already paid into escrow. So we're very close to wrapping up BB. Some other minor expenditures that you'll see in here. We had a little bit at Olympic, and then I think I was going to say Smash, but it doesn't look like it. Oh, a little bit to close out the old Samo High project, the innovation building. There's always a few little things that I shouldn't say always, but there are a few little things that we're still cleaning up. But again, the expenditures here are minor, and we anticipate going forward, they will also stay low. Any questions on that, or Michael, should we move on to ES?
Anybody have questions on the BB?
Just on the Malibu, what does it say there? It says it's, I'm sorry, it's combined with main project. What does that mean?
Which one are you talking about?
Malibu?
I get this. Yes, under Malibu, the parking lot, the offsite traffic were both combined into that first line. So where we
talking
had
about the comment?
budgeted, they
Right.
were all aligned into the one project.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So at one point we had anticipated doing that separately, and you can see we budgeted that separately, but it was all done under the same contract.
Got it. Thank you.
So
All right.
no further questions on this. I'll take this one
Mhm.
away, and I will bring up the next one.
Okay.
Okay.
And sharing it.
Thank you. So here as always, we've got some expenditures that are district-wide. So our technology, we're going to see these 21st century classrooms, and there'll be a few other expenditures that will continue on that section, which are actually managed by the IT department. Now going a little further down, Carrie, I don't think we have any.
Yeah, I just want to say on
the
the technology is that we're working with IT to designate and clarify where they're going to spend this remaining, where these remaining funds, because they have about 6.6 million remaining. And so we're trying to get that clarified, and we should have a board presentation coming up for that. I'm hoping in the July meeting. If not, then we'll do it in the 1st of August meeting.
And I don't think we had many expenditures for ES, and it doesn't look like we had any in Malibu.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Samo High, our primary expenditure from ES during this time period was the Discovery Building. The work is complete, but I shouldn't say that. The project is in use, but as we've continued using it, much like I described earlier, there are closeout things that will continue. I mean, our inspectors are still having to work, for example, to verify final completion, as well as then do all the paperwork to get it closed out with DSA. But we're well on the way in that process. And so we do have some expenditures here, and I anticipate in the next quarter we will as well for the Discovery Building. There's nothing else really significant here. I mean, we did have some on the HVAC and electrical project, which is now complete. Carrie, why don't you go ahead and scroll down? Okay, and then here we'll get into our window paint and floor projects and our HVAC projects. Again, not significant expenditures this time period in ES. We do have some on McKinley, which you can see there. Then a little further down, Jams Auditorium. Again, that's a project that is also in use and is in the closeout process. so we anticipate seeing a few more expenditures over the next maybe two reporting periods. But the work is complete. The facility is in use and has been, I think, generally very well received. We would love to get you guys as a committee out there. And in fact, perhaps when we talk, Michael, perhaps when we talk about our next meeting, we can discuss maybe doing it in person and doing it as a site tour.
Sure.
That would
works for you guys.
Great. I would love to do that. What
It's
is
really
the
a lovely facility. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What is the 2.476 million there on the line? Those are remaining funds for JAMS Auditorium, it says, or,
That's correct.
and what, are we gonna spend $2 million on it over there if it's mostly done?
Well, I think let me verify this. We did, there's a weird thing that happened on that project. We got a fair amount of state funding in that range, actually, in the 2-point-something million range. And when we budgeted for this, we didn't know for sure we were getting it. So it may be that some of that is the leftover, which would mean that would go back to, the general, to the general bond fund. So we'd be able to use that in other projects. But I don't recall there being that significant of a, it wouldn't be an overage, it would be the remaining amount. So let me, if it's okay, I'd like to verify that. But we do still have, like I said, some work to finish it up.
Yeah,
I hear you though. That does seem like a big amount.
Seems like a lot for a project that's basically done. Left over, I mean, a lot left
Yeah,
over.
and I don't think it's retention because again, that was also a lease back project. So I'm fairly confident we've paid the equivalent of retention into escrow. But I will verify that and have an answer next time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the last.
Yeah, we
page,
do
I
have the
think.
last part of that, which is the marquee project. That's still going to come out of that.
But that wasn't, yes, you're right. Of
Not
course,
that
but
much.
it wasn't that much money.
Not at all.
And then here again, we see as always, we see our centralized costs. And one of the things that we typically see is that the remaining balance there is shown as a negative because at fiscal year end, the centralized costs get distributed to all of our projects kind of on a pro rata basis. So we typically hold a significant negative there. And then at the close of fiscal year, it zeroes out. But we do have some budget issues on this program, or on this bond, I should say. Now, several of our projects went over budget, and we're at the point where we're close to being able to look at what needs to move out of this bond and into measure SMS, as well as what can be reduced. So for example, Catherine, you pointed out that 2.4 million or 2.6 million.
Yeah.
Once we have a whole number and we know what our number is, we can reduce. There are several of these projects where you'll see there's a remaining balance. And when that happens, we reduce that remaining balance to zero when there is no more project to do. And then obviously that impacts the bottom line and typically improves it. But you will see that some of them are negative. So again, right now, I think we're anticipating that 9 million, the 9 million that's in the red there, 9.6 as our negative. However, we've also got earned interest on the bond, which of course should be paying for that, should be offsetting that. So once we get through June 30th close, a lot of this will be able to be cleaned up, and you should see much of that going away, frankly.
So
But
Steve, what
may be that-
happens if you end up with a shortfall?
Well, it needs to be funded by a different source. Now, for us, that different source would be Measure SMS. And there are a couple ways we could do that. We could transfer funds from SMS to these projects, or we can transfer the expense from Measure ES to Measure SMS. And a lot of times we would do that by transferring the whole project. So for example, if we were $6 million short, we would say, well, we need to fund this $6 million project from SMS. I mean, cash flow hasn't been a problem, but as you get to the end, of course, you don't have a cash flow problem early on, even if you're going way over budget, because you still haven't spent all your money. As you get to the end of spending on a bond, you can end up upside down. And so we need to fix that before we get to that point.
Is
Right.
that done through an administrative approval? Does that have to go to the board?
We generally would, I don't know if it's required, but oftentimes we would go to the board and at least let them know this is what's happening.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a board action that's required to, it might be, because what we do is when we get a project approved, we of course list the funding source. And if we end up paying from a different funding source, the board would not have approved that. So it may be that we need to get board approval on it. But even if we didn't, what I was getting at is we would still bring it to the board and say, here's what happened. Here's where the money's going to come from. Here's the remaining balance, and kind of give the whole picture. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
So at the
you
close of the fiscal year, though, we're going to see some changes here.
I think at the close of the fiscal year, we'll know enough to do that. Technically, we may not make the changes until we're closing out this bond, which may be more than a year from now. But, again, we've got to make sure we don't go upside down on cash, if that makes sense. So in other words, the money's in the bank. We've got to make sure as we're paying for these things that we have enough to pay for them. So anyway, but I think at the close of fiscal year, what I was maybe not accurately saying, but trying to say is we should have a pretty good picture of where we're going to end up.
Okay. Bruce, were you going to say something?
Yeah, this is the interest received last June.
That's probably as of last June. Does that make sense? In other words, that's all interest that we've received through June 30th, 21.
Okay, so what have we received so far? Because that's like 2 weeks away, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing to remember is that in this, let me to figure out the right way to say this. Obviously, the more money that we're holding in the bank, the more interest we're earning dollar-wise. Percentage is going to be what it is. But so from June of 21 through June of 22, we will have earned interest on whatever we have, but it wasn't a lot of money. Because remember, by June of 21, we had almost finished paying for the Discovery Building. We'd almost finished paying for the Jams Auditorium. So there just wasn't a lot of cash. So I would say it's probably not negligible, but we shouldn't expect to see, $1 million in interest from June of 21 to June of 22.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll. So when would you have an update on that?
I mean, Ashraf probably has that. It's just not a number that she focuses more on our expenditures. And so I didn't even think to ask her to update that. But we can find out what we've earned this year.
It looks like 1/24 of it is left to earn, right? It's like
That's
2 weeks.
probably, well, oh yes, as far as what we've earned this year, she'll, she tracks it when they pay it. And I'm assuming they pay it monthly or quarterly, but I don't know. That's not a number I typically see until it shows up here.
So that interest that's shown there, the 6 million plus, that's through June of 21.
Right.
So that's almost a year ago. Has that money been allocated to something else, or is it still sitting there?
I believe it's still sitting there.
And does that compound or no?
It would.
Okay.
I mean, it would sit in the same interest-bearing account as our principal.
Okay.
It becomes principal, really, I guess is a better way to say it.
Okay.
Okay, Carrie, do you want to go to SMS?
Yes. Hang on a moment. I just had to pull this number for technology. 6643252.
You didn't send these out to us, right?
There's this boxes for the garage. Turn around.
Kathy, did these go out?
Hey, did you send these out to us, these reports? Hello?
I'm not sure if Kathy can hear me, but
Carrie, did you
Yes,
send them
they-
out?
I asked her to send it.
Yes, they have been sent out to you. You might need to update your Outlook invite. It's in your Outlook invite if you look in there now. You would
Yeah,
have
the
had to
Outlook-
accept
Have
it.
them. I have them.
okay, great.
Okay. SMS.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So we see here that much of our expenditure has been on phase 3. You can also see that we've now encumbered 115 million, which would be for the construction contract for phase 3. And when I'm talking phase 3, it's I kind of snapped at our team today for this, so I should be careful about it myself. Phase 3 is just the phase of the San Amo High campus plan, but what the project really is the exploration building and the gymnasium building that we're ready to embark on now. We've been doing some work out there, as you may recall. There's some work we can do prior to getting DSA approval, and that primarily includes things like the demolition and abatement, which was done like a year ago. It also, though, includes some of the grading work. So we were able to haul a significant amount of soil. They were able to start digging the footings. Now, we can't pour the concrete for the footings until we have a permit, but we can have them ready to pour concrete. And that's the status of where we are now. We're ready to start this work as soon as we can get DSA approval. And I'll get to that project in a few minutes. But anyway, so that was our significant expenditures here on SMS at Samo High. We've also been moving forward with, I mean, you'll see in here, there's a few things like the HVAC and electrical project at JAMS. Again, there's minor costs that are going forward. But as we scroll down, Carrie, if you want to go to,
Yes.
let's see. Okay, that's good. So what we'll see here is that we've got some of our projects now moving forward, which well, I'm jumping ahead, I'm sorry. So this is, again, we see more of our HVAC and electrical projects here, and some of our window pane and floor, like at Mirror Smash, we've got our window pane and floor and HVAC going forward. You can see, it looks like we spent about $500,000 in construction costs and 113,000 in soft costs there. Moving forward with Grant as well. Rogers and Roosevelt, a little bit smaller because we're towards the end of those. And then where we're starting to see more of our, thank you, Carrie, that's perfect. More of our soft cost expenditures are here in the elementary school. The original work was, we called it assessments, because that's what it was. We did an assessment of every campus and determine what projects would come next. And I think you guys have seen those in the past. We're now designing some of those. So we're seeing our soft cost expenditures there. We won't see a ton of hard cost expenditures on those until we get into construction, which, if all goes well, we should be able to start some of these a year from now, in the summer of 23. Let's go ahead and keep going down a little bit more, Carrie. Okay, and then our FF&E projects, again, the bulk of that is complete. I think we still have, it's just Mirror Smash, is that right, Carrie?
Yes.
So we still have some to do at Mirror Smash. Now, Mirror Smash has a whole bunch of other different issues that we're going to
Mhm.
spend a fair amount of time on today. I think that'll probably be the bulk
Yeah.
of our update.
Assuming.
We're gonna
And
get
I'm
there.
sorry, we're going through these first. I know that that's super important, but technically this is the part of the project that, I mean, the meeting that you're obligated to do. But I
Right.
promise we're going to spend a lot of time on Mirror Smash.
Okay.
And then our safety and security projects are going forward. Now we're doing window clocks, bells, as well as intrusion alarms at several campuses, and we're kind of, I don't want to say we're skipping through the district, but we've worked with M&O to figure out what are the highest priorities. You know, where, for example, with intrusion alarms, where do we actually have break-ins the most often, or the least functional intrusion alarm system? And they've helped us set those priorities, and so we've been moving those forward at a pretty good pace. And those are typically projects that we can do not just during summer. So we've been able to work at many of our campuses throughout the year. We'll continue that. Of course, we're doing some work over the summer, but we will continue that next year as well on those campuses. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the financials update. I know that I don't want to say the exciting thing, kind of the thing that feels most critical probably to you and certainly to us is to talk about Mirror Smash. But if you have any questions on this before we get into that, we can certainly go through it.
Anyone have questions on SMS for Steve or Carrie?
Nope.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, great. So let me pull up the agenda real quick here.
I'm bringing the agenda back up. Hang on a moment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next item, Michael, is the status of the window pane floor HVAC projects. Those are all proceeding or nearly complete, with the exception of Mirror Smash. Well, I take it back. That one is nearly complete, but as part of that project, we've now added a little bit of scope to that contractor's work. So I'm gonna just tell you that part of it, and then we'll defer the rest to the Mirror Smash water intrusion discussion. But because we've had so many water intrusion issues out there, we brought out a water intrusion expert in April to review the site. We had our contractor who was on site kind of, show them some of the things that they had open. They came back with a plethora of recommendations, including further invasive investigation. So we're doing that this summer, and because we had this contractor on site, it's Nazarian Group. We're using Nazarian Group to do the typically we're using their subcontractor Karcher to do the spot demolition and abatement that's necessary. So we're going to continue with expenditures on that project, even though at some point we have to understand it looks like an HVAC window pane and floor expenditure, but the reality is we're doing it because of the water intrusion problem. So again, that'll be something that you'll see going forward, but that's ongoing now. Oh, I did something out of order. I should have waited on the SMS update. That's my bad. Sorry about that. But Michael, I think we can now roll down to item B2.
Okay.
5B2, which is the exploration and gold gym update. Kind of gave you a preview of that update. We're ready to start construction as soon as we can get approval from DSA. The board has already approved the contract for McCarthy to do the work. So once we get that approval, I'll say we'll hit the ground running. We're literally ready to pour concrete. So it should be, and we need, I think it's something like 3 days to order the concrete. So once we get approval and we know it's coming, we'll go and order the concrete, and that project will be hopefully on schedule. Which brings us to district-wide FF&E. Carrie, I don't really have an update on this unless you have something.
We have completed everything except for the Mirror Smash. Furniture was supposed to be delivered this summer. And we are going to be redistributing or reallocating that furniture to where the students are moving. So we'll still put some of it in the Mirror Smash building, but most of it will go to the Obama Center and others. And I'll talk about the relocation program in a minute, but that's pretty much done. We do have some leftover funds. We have a couple of projects. We're talking about the music classrooms need some movable tables. Some of our kitchens and cafeterias could use some new tables because the old ones are ancient. And we're also, I'm looking at replacing some throw rugs that are in kindergartens and preschools and things like that, because the ones we have are older and nasty. And so we'd like to make them a little less nasty. So those are 3 projects we think we can fit in within the budget with what we have remaining.
Thank you. So now moving on to our elementary and middle school projects. I think we can really talk about the historic resources, campus plans, and SMS projects, which will be the first of those elementary and middle school projects, kind of all together. They are the plans that you've seen in the past. You know, we've completed now took about a year, but we've completed the historic resources reports, and it does impact a few of our, well, I guess it really impacts Roosevelt. It, I think, also impacts to some extent McKinley. Is that correct, Carrie? Or is that just a kindergarten issue?
There are things that are recommended for historic resources at practically every campus, pretty much everything except Lincoln. And some of those aligned with our projects and our master plans better than others. In some places, we are having to go back and relook at the master plans for that. Mostly it's Roosevelt for that. So what I want to say is I'll sort of treat them a little bit together. I want to walk through the schools a moment. So is it all right I do this, Steve?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. So Grant Elementary School, which is, so we understand what the historic is there. We're really treating that respectfully. We're moving forward with our CEQA process, our California Environmental Quality Act process. For that, we will be doing a mitigated negative declaration, I believe. For that, that'll be done in the fall. We are preserving all of the potential resources except for one building. But we believe, and our historians tell us, that we will be maintaining the historic district even if we remove that one building. But we are moving forward with this summer with the projects that should begin next summer, the library renovation, the relocation and development of 2 classrooms for transitional kindergarten, and also the historic garden upgrade. So those are all moving forward. Yes?
Is my recollection correct that that was a secondary, that building that will be removed was a secondary contributor, not primary?
It's a primary.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
But we still are able to maintain the integrity of the historic.
Yeah,
district.
because we're retaining all the other primary and some of the secondary ones right around it. So it feels like that we can still sort of make it work as far as the, and that's what's being looked at in the EIR process, but it does feel pretty good about where we are. But
Good.
those 3 smaller projects are all sort of going together. They're in design development. I think they're passing design development now and heading into the construction documents phase. Okay, and then I'll walk over to Will Rogers. Will Rogers, the majority of that campus is considered potentially historic as a mid-50s design, but our master planning does not really touch any of those buildings for the most part. So we are moving forward with the EIR experience on that. We will be taking a look at all of that. I will say in the later phases, we will be, there's a much better way of saying this, but we have a number of finger buildings. And then at the very end, there are these little end one-room classrooms that we sometimes call the fingernails. And those are secondary contributors to the historic district. We're keeping all the finger buildings and the front buildings, the admin and cafeteria, but we will be pulling out a few of the fingernails at the end. Like I said, not the best way to say this.
Yeah. That's a nice graphic way to say that. Now,
But
Carrie,
that will open up the field. Yes.
I think on Rogers, we've also truncated the, well, I think maybe on all these, we've truncated the master plan to the work that is achievable in the next, say, 15 years. Correct?
Yeah, we initially took a look at all of our master plans, thinking of like a 25, 30-year out horizon. It was more of a test fit of how we would, complete our ed specs and where we might go. And then we pulled that back to something that's much more manageable in a 15 to 20 year line. So in that way, we're also not touching a lot of the historic buildings now, but maybe 25, 30 years from now, as education changes, we might approach that. But that was part of the way we really wanted to focus on what's achievable and not just talk about the maybes,
Yeah.
because that just confused the dialogue at all of these campuses. So on this one, we are moving forward with the early learning building, the TK and K and building that replaces a bunch of portable classrooms. They'll be going in on the northeast corner of the campus in the new field. So that is in it's completing design development, and it is moving forward with into construction drawings. I will say, and plan to start construction next summer. I will say that some of our historical folks took a deeper look at, and the historic architect took a deeper look at the master plan just to make sure that the buildings that were planned, while they are not removing any primary buildings, they wanted to make sure they didn't obscure or block, and they felt like with what we have planned based on views, it works very well at that campus. Across the street at John Adams, we're doing just a library renovation project. And while this is a primary potential historic building, mostly we're just doing a little courtyard impact and some big doors going into the courtyard. It's a great project, so that's happening. We're also doing a maintenance and operations project that's not in the funding of this, but just to say where between some of the finger buildings, there was this area that I like to call the LA River because it just looked drab and dead. And so we're doing what's called the linear courtyard project, where we rip up the concrete in that area and we replant it and we deck it and we make it so it's a much nicer experience for the students between those classrooms. So we're excited about that project, a small one, and maintenance. We're paying that with our redevelopment funds. Up at McKinley, we are moving forward. That project, the first big project for that is a new classroom and admin building. So we're getting the third graders out of bungalows. We're getting the first graders and kindergartners out of bungalows and into this new 2-story building with admin. There was some concern from the Conservancy that it was a little bit large and blocking the view of the potentially historic buildings. So we did a little bit of redesign and work with our historical architect to sort of adjust the size, relationship, the scope of how that building fits in. And I feel like we were able to move that along very, very well. The other projects for the longer range plan are going on. Those will not touch the 2 main buildings, which are the potentially historic buildings. We will be doing some work in and around them, but the front yard and everything that's historic won't be touched on those. Up at Franklin, we had only the main building, the front building, was designated as potentially historic, and the front lawn. So we're working on that. We're not touching that, but really all we're doing there is we're taking out 4 bungalows and putting in a new makerspace building for project-based learning. And that's in design, moving forward with construction next summer. The rest of the campus plan sort of takes that way. There is since there wasn't a historic district there, we're not really touching anything that's historic on that campus, but we have plans. And then also we'll do the field this summer, where we reorient the field and create the basketball courts, create a better fire lane drop off as necessary for the fire. And then McKinley, Franklin, Rogers, Grant, Adams. That's the 5 schools that have projects that are coming up as SMS projects. Just to say, on the other 2 schools that we looked at, Roosevelt, in some ways you look at it and go, yeah, that just looks like any other school. But what was important was after the 1933 earthquake, Roosevelt was the very first sort of building built on a finger plan with outdoor courtyards in what March, Smith and Powell, noted architects, called the Santa Monica plan. And the Santa Monica plan was pretty simple. In one way, it was first, let's build buildings that don't fall down whenever the earthquake happens, which was significant since we lost or damaged 90% of our buildings in the 1933 Long Beach earthquake. But also it was how to use outdoor learning, how to have sort of better scale for students, and a lot of really great 1937 educational ideas. And some of them are similar to our 2022 educational ideas, and others aren't. And that's a little bit of our challenge, is that so much of that building of that campus is potentially historic, that it really, on a small, tight campus, it sort of ties our hands as to what we can do there. And we have a lot of portable classrooms, a lot of undersized classrooms, classrooms that do not meet our educational goals today. So I can say we're not yet at a campus plan that we are all satisfied with. That teachers and parents and the community and the conservancy and other stakeholders and the neighbors, we're just not there yet with a plan that we can say, yes, this is our plan. So we're going to be doing some additional work over the summer and then going back to the community in the fall to try to get them to settle that. Similarly, at Lincoln, we don't have any historic buildings that are a challenge, but we just haven't figured out what the next step is there. We have a lot of options, but we haven't just determined and worked that out. And we have to do more work with our community to nail that down. But we're not going to need to nail either that one down or the Roosevelt plan, because neither of them will be having projects before we go out for another bond. So the earliest we begin construction on
They're not funded by SMS.
What's that?
Yeah. I said just that they're not funded by SMS.
That is correct. They're not funded by SMS. So that sort of tells you where we are with our SMS projects. Any questions?
You mentioned another bond. Carrie, do you foresee a bond for 2024?
I would say yes. That's what our planning is. That's what we're talking about, is that, and with what we're going to need to do at Muir Smash, I think that's definitely going to have an impact on it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the
So-
college is going this year and we're probably lined up for 24.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
honestly, it's not a great time to go out for a bond for this fall. Based
No,
on
I
the current
mean,
economic climate. I mean. good
Yeah, I don't
chance-
know about that.
I totally agree with you. I mean, honestly, 6 months ago, I was really advocating for it because I felt we could justify it because we know the work that's coming. We know that we're going to need this money. And honestly, right around the beginning of 24, we might need some of it. But I think in retrospect, the way things are right now, I feel like this is a tough time to go for a bond. So I think we're fortunate that we did not end up doing that.
I agree, and I think the college is going to be hard pressed to get theirs passed.
I do too. I think it's, I don't think it's gonna go this time.
Yeah, and they've got some challenges that are, just being the college, they have some challenges that we might not have faced. So I think they're gonna have a tough one.
Okay.
Yeah, those tea leaves are hard to estimate. I mean, and
Sure.
when we jumped quickly in 18 when the city decided not to go out, and we were really glad we did because 2020 was a lousy time to go out for a bond. So
Yeah.
it's we don't know.
Specifically March was. I mean, November, a number of, because that's what we were considering is, picking it up in the March primary. A ton of bonds failed. Now, a lot of them did pass in November of that year, but it's like Carrie said, it's really a crapshoot, and you're guessing sometimes 2 years in advance.
Right.
So we're just gonna have to see how it goes in 24. But at that point, we will be, if we want our projects to continue, 24 will be the time when we do need to go forward.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about safety security upgrades. So a lot of those are moving forward, and we finished pretty much all the camera projects. We are now doing bell, clock, and PA systems, which are really helpful for lockdown and other situations. And those are working their way through the district. We've done a handful of schools, and about a third of them, we have more to do. The intrusion alarms, we're going in, and we in Santa Monica, we have to go back and replace all of our intrusion alarms. We've done Samo High. We're working on a couple other schools. Those are in process. And, and sadly, after the recent shooting in Texas, at every shooting, we relook at our campuses. We do a pretty deep analysis of every school shooting and look at what are the best, the lessons learned. And we have some things we are learning and things we're doing. Even though this particular shooter did not come in through the front door, we are thinking about, particularly at our elementary schools, sort of hardening our entrances even more. And it's sort of a question of how we balance that between feeling welcoming to parents in the community and how we make sure that we provide an appropriate barrier to stop, an active shooter. So it is something we're taking a deeper look at, and the safety committee is going to be reviewing that.
Okay.
I think that brings us to the big one, your
Yep.
smash. If there's nothing else, if there's no questions, rather.
I'll jump in on this one first. Historically, since this building, the campus was built, the Smash Mirror campus was built in the 90s, and then it was added onto in 2000, there have been issues with water intrusion. We understand there was some discussion. I mean, the anecdotal story was that there was a lawsuit that the district had against the builder and the architect, and that the district lost. We're trying to prove whether that's true. That's the anecdotal story, like I said, but it's but there was water intrusion problems. And when I sort of came in and sort of started taking over to the department, we
Can I
knew we
interrupt for a
had some
second?
problems.
Let me interrupt. So when you say water intrusion, can you define that? Because it obviously doesn't rain a whole hell of a lot here. So where's it coming from?
Yeah,
It's-
but when it does rain, most of that water goes inside the building. I
Yeah.
mean, you're right. It's not like we're in Florida where it rains every day, but there's, and Carrie's going to go through some of the issues here, but there's leaks on the roofs, there's leaks in the gutters, meaning like the channel between two roof sections. There's holes in the walls, there's missing sealant that in some cases look like it was never applied. There's missing building paper, which would be the waterproofing layer behind the stucco. Windows are installed and flashed incorrectly or flashed backwards in some cases. It almost feels like you would have to do this on purpose. It's a systemic issue.
Okay, so it's not water table issues. It's not percolating up from the ground, nothing like that.
No.
Okay.
This is rainwater, or in some cases we did find. I mean, gosh, this was, I think 2 years ago, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we found that there was an area where the sprinklers, and I want to say it was right outside the multi-purpose room, the sprinklers were spraying on the building, and they were getting, and maybe I'm wrong on the building, but they were getting some biological growth, like mold growth inside. Is that correct, Carrie?
Yeah, and so what I want to say is, so we knew there was a problem, about 6 years ago, and we started to systematically try to fix the problem. So we did some roof repairs. We did some repairs to windows. We redid the decks, sort of recovered and recoated all of the decks because we knew that was a place. And all of these solved some of the water problems, but did not fully solve the water problems. And as we were doing our modernization project, we kept opening up restrooms and walls and things, and we kept finding evidence that we were having we'd had much more water intrusion than we thought we had had. And we started really looking at that through the fall. And then over December, overall, this was a relatively dry winter, but we got a lot of rain very, very quickly in December. And the water just poured in some rooms. And so what we knew and we appreciated was that all the things we had done previously had not solved the problem, that we still had a problem. So we brought in a water intrusion expert, sort of a national company that does this. And they did a study and then issued a report. They did a study over spring break and issued a report that we got 3 or 4 weeks before school was out. Steve.
Yeah,
Now, that report was not nice. I mean, it basically said that it found every building on the campus to be in, I think it said poor to moderately poor, something like that
Yes.
condition. They found, I mean, I went through some of the types of leaks and problems that they mentioned earlier, which was, missing sealant and cracked stucco and things like that. They saw evidence of, they did see evidence of biological growth in some places, which is mold, and we're going to get to mold in a minute. But they also saw that, for example, where stucco had chipped off and there was the plywood sheathing behind it was visible, they could, in some cases, they found it actually wet to the touch. In other cases, they could see that it had gotten wet and dried, over a number of cycles. And when you do that with plywood, which is what that sheathing is, it tends to expand and then contract and expand it, and it breaks the glue. So you end up losing the structural integrity of that sheathing. So they made a recommendation. They made a number of recommendations. One of their recommendations was bring out a structural engineer, which we have done. They recommended bringing out an industrial hygienist, which we already had on board, but we've increased their work out there. Ultimately what they recommended was replace all the exterior.
oh, you're breaking up.
Okay, so what Steve is saying is a lot of what they
or
replaced.
remove and sealant rather.
You broke up, Steve.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah,
You're
I
back.
think you are.
Okay, I'm sorry.
A
Anyway,
lot of what they
ultimately-
replaced was.
well, ultimately what they recommended was replace all of the building envelope, all roofs, all decks, all stucco, everything. Which, as you can imagine, is a significant undertaking. I mean, you're really talking about getting the building down to its bones and putting on new clothes. But they also recommended some additional investigation, which is underway now. That's the work that I mentioned earlier that Nazarian's doing. They started tearing the walls apart today. We are working with our state funding consultant because it's not certain, but there is a possibility that we may be able to obtain some state funding to pay for a portion of whatever work is necessary. But ultimately, that's the question: is what work is necessary. So as we do this investigation, our structural engineer, our architect, our waterproofing consultants, as well as the state funding consultant, are all on site, observing the exposed areas. The structural engineer and waterproofing consultant will work with the architect to make recommendations. We anticipate that they may recommend certain repairs. It is possible that the cost of those repairs may be so expensive that it would justify replacing certain buildings. Perhaps not all, but it is possible that we might need to replace one or more buildings on that campus. But we've got to go through this process. So this summer, what we're doing is all of the investigative work to figure that out. And then we'll have to make some decisions, and that's going to probably require board input to make those decisions to determine what the next project will be. Now, one thing that's probably pretty obvious is whatever that project is, because it's going to hit every building and almost every space in most buildings, it's going to be a lot better to do that without kids on campus. So in addition to that, we located a significant amount of mold in one, I believe, third grade classroom. Is that right? 415 was third grade?
Yeah, it's a second, third grade. It was
Anyway,
a mixed. It was a mixed.
Second and third, okay.
Second and third. It's about both
So
together.
the principal worked with us to thank you. The principal worked with us to relocate that classroom to an existing space that they have that did not have mold for the last couple of weeks of the year. But beginning next year, we won't have kids on that campus. So it's imperative for us to move forward quickly because, and I think Carrie will probably walk us through where kids are going to be. But we've not dislocated, we've relocated or displaced not just the students from both SMASH and MUIR, but we've also displaced the students from the Obama Center. So we've got our PBL there, we've got Olympic High School there, we've got OCLC, adult education. I think Carrie at one point said that we've displaced 750 of our students. So we need to move quickly so we can remedy that and get people back where they need to be. But we're in the very early stages of that from our side, from the facility side. But Carrie, perhaps you can walk through what the district has determined we'll do with the students, and then while we're at it, we might as well talk about the mold.
Okay, I'm gonna address the mold first.
Okay.
So there has been for a couple of years the presence or the visual presence of mold growth in certain areas. And I did put a link here to our environmental page for MUIR, but you can see that over a few years, we continually have done air and mold tests in those buildings. And what we have found is that with very, very, very few exceptions, the level of mold inside the classroom either matches or is less than the amount of mold outdoors. There is no state standard on what mold and what mold levels are. That basically what they do is they do outdoor tests and indoor tests, because mold is everywhere. It's like at this moment you are breathing in mold, but the question is, when is it concentrated and what is that pathway of exposure? And so what they look at is when the air is, when the mold in the air in the classroom is higher than outdoors, then you have an area of concern and something to look at. Now, in this last set of tests, we found one classroom that had that concern, and that was the one we moved kids out of. In the past, we hadn't found really any areas of concern, or where we found one where the ventilation was higher inside a classroom because it was getting air right outside of where the compost pit had been put. So the composting had mold, and that was creating mold inside the room. Or where a teacher had overwatered the plant, and underneath the plant, it had created mold. So while there is, Berenice will be with you in a second, while there is evidence of it, it's not been at a level that is been unsafe, and I put around that, our industrial hygienists never want us to use the word safe, but at an unacceptable level for students to be in. But as we talked about the water intrusion, as we talked about the potential for more mold to be found, as we talked about the impact of construction, particularly on this very tight campus, the overall feeling from parents and teachers and faculty was they would like to be somewhere else while the work happens.
Yeah.
So we have arranged a schedule and a plan for that to happen. And I'll talk about that in a moment after we hear from Berenice. Dr. Onofre.
Bernice, you muted.
Yes. Thank you. So the classroom that was affected, the students and the staff, are they being followed? Do they have a medical follow-up? Well, what is happening to their health?
Certainly. We have made it available for any of the teachers, staff, or students who want to go ahead and get medically tested to, we've encouraged them, through our workman's comp to go get tested. We've also encouraged the parents to have any students tested, and we would certainly pick up any costs specifically for that. What our industrial hygienist said that, because of COVID, we actually were in a really great place to have any form of mold in the classroom, because we had enhanced and improved the air systems, including an ionization system that actually helps capture mold. We had improved and increased the filters. In most classrooms, they were operating every day with the windows and doors open. And until very recently, the students were wearing masks every day. So
Yeah.
all of these things, also in the classrooms, most every classroom had an operating industrial air scrubber. So as far as the spread and mold, if it was there, and the potential for it getting into any students and impacting any students' health or adults, it was already very low because of just happened that we had great indoor air quality because of COVID.
Have we done anything about liability for the contractors who built this
We are
And,
looking into that. It's going to go back 30 years, and we don't know what we can do. As we're finding out that anecdotal story that I told you that there was a lawsuit once is not accurate, it might leave us open for something, but we don't know. We have our legal team working on that question. So let me tell you about the relocation plan, which is very busy. So the board approved a week ago Monday a relocation plan. So the Muir Elementary students, most of them will go to Will Rogers. Will Rogers has room because of declining enrollment. And so we'll send most of them there, particularly any of those who are in the Muir boundary. So Muir Elementary was already declining significantly as an elementary school. It was down to just above 200, and of those 200, about 40% of those were transfers, either intra or inter-district transfers, either from other parts of the district or from outside of the district. So we believe we can definitely have enough room for everybody who is in the boundaries of Muir to go to Rogers. Most of those others will go to Rogers, but then about 40 to 50 students will be offered the opportunity to go to other schools, all the other elementary schools. And the reason why I was a little late getting here was as attending the Franklin Elementary School tour, so we've had tours at each of the elementary schools so parents can come and witness and experience. And we've asked everybody to turn in their intra-district transfer forms by the end of this week to say which school preference they have. The special education intensive program that was at Muir, about 20 students, that's going to move to McKinley. And so we have a nice place for them. It's really going to fit real well with them. Actually, a lot of the students live closer to McKinley than Muir. So we feel like that will work. The special education preschool will move over to Washington West, which is where our offices are. Now, SMASH, the Santa Monica Alternative Schoolhouse, is going to move to the Obama Center, which was the Olympic High School, which before that was Muir Elementary School on Ocean Park and Lincoln. So they're going to inhabit that old elementary school campus, and we're making it back into an elementary school campus as quickly as we can. We have a whole lot of plans for that. And we're working with Santa Monica College for the project-based learning cohort, Olympic High School, Off-Campus Learning Center, and Independent Study, all to move to Santa Monica College, the main college, to what's called the Pico Classroom Complex. That's 3 finger buildings that's right there sort of in the middle of campus. They're slated for demolition in about 3-4 years if this bond passes, but they're really nice classrooms. They've been used for all sorts of things. They were classrooms, then they were shops, and then they were offices, and then they were classrooms, and right now they're in a classroom phase. So they work really well to fit our programs. And
Is that the math, those temporary math village buildings?
no, it's not the Pico Village, the portable classrooms. It's the one right adjacent to that. Between that and the newest building, right where you come in and do the turnaround with the fountain.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Off of Pico. As you come in to turn around that fountain, they'd be on your right.
Okay, got it.
And it's a single story, 3 finger buildings, about 20 classrooms, 20 rooms, which will fully fit our program. And they were able to arrange that they would be available for us. We have a lot to do with Santa Monica College to make this deal a real deal, make it happen. We have a meeting with all of the operations people tomorrow. I've got legal working on the addendum to the memorandum of understanding. We have lots to do. And as I said, we have a lot of people to move. but we're working to get it all done, and we believe we'll have everybody in a new seat and ready to go for August 18th, which is 9 weeks from tomorrow. Not that I'm counting.
Whew. Good Lord.
So
Okay.
it's a big thing. I mean, I feel like we could have kept some kids on campus, but the desire was to move. And hopefully that means that once we get ourselves lined up, we can really knock it out and then rethink things. I will say, just because Dr. Jody always starts his speech with this, is he likes to think about it in 3 phases. There was the phase 1, which was get all the kids safely through the end of the school year. Then there's the phase 2 of figure out where everybody goes in August. So we figured it out, we're getting it done, that's happening. Phase 3 is what happens after this. You know, how do we remake, how do we rethink what happens on the Muir Smash campus, what happens to Muir Elementary School, what happens to Smash, what happens to the PBO cohort, Olympic. All of those are pretty much up for discussion. And then Dr. Drotti's looking forward to the fall, really having some serious conversations about what happens. We know there'll be some form of neighborhood school there at that Muir Smash campus. We just don't know what that will look like exactly. And we know that, you know, the PBL program, we like it off of the Samuel High campus, so it might go back to the Obama Center whenever it's done. But we're actually very excited about Olympic being on the college campus.
Yeah.
We think the continuation school, that synergy is going to create a really great thing. And we have a new principal for that program who's really excited about it, coming, Cynthia McGregory, coming from Franklin, but who worked in continuation before. We're very excited about where we're going to go with that program. We actually see that that program's become a little stagnant, the Olympic program. It dropped down to only like 50 students, and it wasn't doing really what it intended to do, or it wasn't really serving kids. And we think that a new revisited program in conjunction with the college, sort of a middle university, middle college experience, is the right thing for that program. So we're going to have a lot of discussions as to where we go next. Once we figure out what we're going to do at the Muir Smash campus. And I'll just go on to say, so we don't know what we're going to do, what's going to need. So this summer, the question really is, we have to clearly determine what the scope is for the work that has to be done. And what the phasing is and what the estimated cost would be, how long it'll take. And we also have another question, which is we have to answer a threshold question of, are we spending more money to fix a building than we should? Because the Division of State Architects has it's like, it would be easy if we could say it's a clear line, but it's a squiggly, it's a mushy line that they say you're not supposed to spend more than 50% on repairs to, you know, if you're spending more than 50%, you should replace a building. However, they say, well, actually make that 40%, because just in case while you're doing the work, you want to make sure you don't find anything extra that pushes you over the 50%. Then they say, oh, wait a minute, you just did a modernization. So include that in the number. And then what they do, which is really fun, which is it's not based on how much we would spend in Santa Monica to build a building. It's based on how much they'd spend, like, you know, out in
it's a theoretical number, which is
theoretical
low.
number. So it's about, you know, they say it's about $600 a square foot, and we spend about $1,000 a square foot. So we might cross that threshold very easily, but that doesn't mean we'll have enough money to replace that building or the buildings. There are 5 buildings, and I like us to keep talking about each building separately because they all have differing issues with the water intrusion. They shouldn't be treated uniformly. You know, one has a lot worse problems than 3 of the other ones. And so,
Gary, how do you fund these improvements?
that's a great question.
Yeah, that was the money. What about the money?
Well, first we have to know how much, and then we have to know when. And then we have to look at other sources of funding. If it's simple, then we might have a question that goes, looking at our SMS budget, that 1 or 2 of those projects that are planned as far as the SMS projects might not happen next year. I don't want to cross that line until we know we're going to cross it.
Okay.
Right, we would
If we
defer those
find-
projects. We wouldn't cancel them. We would just defer them until we are able to secure additional funding.
Yeah. If
Okay.
what we find is that we're going to have to replace one or more buildings, we just bought ourselves 2 or more years. Because first we have to answer Dr. Dradi's phase 3 question of what's going to go there. Then we have to program it, design it, and send it to the Division of State Architects to be approved. So we bought ourselves at least 2 years before we're ready to go into construction. So
Which really-
if we're going to
Which
go,
really puts it on a 24 bond.
it puts it on a 24 bond.
Okay.
And so we don't know. And it's not right for Steve or I to speculate at all what that cost is going to look like.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions for Carrie or Steve on this?
Well, I'm sorry you're having to do it. Ah,
Carrie, I thought your synopsis was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
We are at the
Excellent.
end of our
Not the first
agenda.
time I've done it in the last,
I'm sure.
in the last
I'm
month.
sure. We're at the end of our agenda
You got it
today.
down, Terry.
Uh-huh. Does anyone on the committee have any additional questions for Carrie or Steve?
No.
No? Okay, let's talk about our next meeting, date and location.
It's a tour,
We've
right?
proposed, we've proposed, I think it was September 14th as a tour at Jams.
I think that's a great idea.
Great.
Anybody have any objections to that?
The 14th?
The 14th of September at Jams. It'll probably be, what, like 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
if that works for you guys, that'd be great.
Or
That'd
we
be
can do it
great.
at 5 if you'd rather.
Is there
I
enough
think-
daylight? Oh, there is in September. It's up to you guys.
A 4 would work better, and then you guys get home a little earlier.
Okay.
Fine by me.
Okay, let's plan on that.
And I'll put 4 o'clock. Is that what you just said?
4
Michael?
o'clock for September the 14th.
Okay.
Okay. And if there are no more questions, I need a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
Bruce moved to adjourn. Do I have a second? Oh, that
I'll
wasn't Bruce, it was Jeff.
I think
I'm
it was
sorry.
Jeffrey. Yeah.
It was Jeffrey. I apologize.
I'll second it.
Bruce seconded. All in
He was
favor
gonna
of
get you in there,
adjourning?
Bruce.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you all for being here, and thank you guys for running a very efficient meeting today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
lots of information.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.